Abundantly clear. Abundantly clear. Abundance can promote a sense of agency in the charitable. We can't have true empathy for other people as we don't share realities. The definition of scarcity differs per resource. Privilege is judging another's privilege. Before you save the world, save you. So the next tweet here, a refined version of that tweet is called Fudged Lens. Fudged Lens. We'll read the tweet and then we'll break it down. Fudged Lens. Abundance can promote a sense of charity in good, moral people. But we can't have true empathy as we can't know another's reality. Definitions of scarcity differ per resource, per person. Privilege is judging another's privilege. Before you save the world, save you. Okay. So, abundance can promote a sense of agency in the charitable. So when you have more things, when you have a lot of things, there's an abundance of goods, of resources, of course, it gives you a sense, or it's likely to give you a sense, it's not deterministic, but it's likely to give you a sense of charity. Well, I don't need all of these things. I have enough. And therefore I think I should give to charity, whether I'm getting any sort of tax benefit or not. Doesn't matter if I'm rich or if I'm poor. You know, it's all relative. But for me, this is in the mindset here that I have more agency to be charitable. I can afford to be charitable because I have abundance. But we can't have true empathy for other people as we don't share realities. Now, I've talked about this in some of my other videos, including my video generating racism. Definitely check that out on my channel, as well as more thoughts on generating racism. Of course, I do not wish to generate racism. It's just a provocative title and gets the mind thinking, kind of frames you up, gets you into the right frame of mind for the content in front of you. But I talk about how we don't really have true empathy. We have a degree of empathy, of course. As human beings, we all share the human experience, the human condition, as it were. But ultimately, we do have our inner reality that we see through our eyes, the lens on the world, and we have outer reality, which is observable, it's more objective, it's the one we all share, it's the one we're all looking at right now. 7+ billion perspectives of inner reality looking out at all the rest in outer reality. So we can't, as a man, I have in-group preference. As a male, biological male, I do have in-group preference for men because I empathize with them more. As somebody with a white skin tone, of course, when I see people being racist against white people, or any other group, but certainly white people, I do feel, of course, to some degree, a level of offense. Now, racism, of course, I've been called a racist 1,000 times. It flows right off of me, and it should flow off of you too, because, people can label you as you like. They can make the associations that they want, but at the end of the day, we can name call all day. It doesn't make any of it true. So, I do defend, of course, people of all backgrounds, all immutable characteristics such as skin tone, sex, sexuality, things like that, as well as mutables such as religion, occupation, and hobbies. I like to make sure we're not judging people by group averages or by the groups that they may be associated with or the people they talk to. On this channel and in my personal philosophy and advocacy, I like to think of individual merit, flaws, pros, and cons of each individual person. Their character, like I said, merit. Judge people on character, merit, flaws. Not their immutable characteristics that they can't change. It's not fair if they can't change it, right? But that said, even though we have in-group preference, we certainly have things on the out-group that we like as well. And just because we're different, all of us, there's great diversity. Diversity is a strength in many ways. With diversity, just because we have in-group preference, which is immutable, because it happens, in-group preference is immutable when it comes to immutable characteristics, we can't really have absolute empathy. We can get to maybe 50% if you're lucky over that. But ultimately, unless we are self-loathing or don't have, any sort of positive feelings for our own selves, if we're beating ourselves up, if we see ourselves in a negative light, of course, then we might have a little bit of what is called out-group preference. But ultimately, empathy is about being able to personally identify with someone else's feelings or situation. Then there's sympathy, of course, which is a separate question. So we can't have true empathy, 100% empathy, but we can have some, always. And I do recommend it. But we don't share realities. We don't share realities. And the definition of scarcity differs per resource. So what that means is that for each individual person, the definition of scarcity is different. For each person, resource, and situation, it's all individual situations. It's very subjective. There are objective truths to these things as well, but it's all very contextual. Access, privilege, if you will. Privilege is essentially access. You have access to things that other people don't. So they call that privilege. So the definition of scarcity differs per resource. But privilege is judging another's privilege. What that means is that nobody, unless somebody has 100% of the picture about somebody else's life or circumstances, they can't judge how much privilege they have. Because there are certain things that they may have an abundance of in their life, but then there's other things that they may have scarcity. They might not have the same access or abilities, or what you call, some people would refer to as privileges, in their life to do the things they want. They don't have the articulation that they'd like, the agency, if you will, to do the things, to expand their free will, rational and irrational, and do the things they like. So when someone comes up to you and starts judging privilege, we all have our own plight in life. We all have our own circumstances. We all have our pros and cons of what's going on, the upsides and the downsides. So there's always costs and benefits to every lifestyle and everything that is going on. So it does differ per resource and per person. The definition of scarcity and privilege is judging another's privilege. If you are, it's one thing if you are truly lacking in different forms of privilege and you're saying, well, I'm destitute in this regard or that regard, and I'm looking at somebody that has it all. Now, in my world, I believe that privilege largely comes down to a few key factors. Obviously, this isn't very nuanced, but it's a good framing to get you started. I think that privilege is largely based on appearance and intelligence. Now, intelligence, of course, is an amorphous term. That there's many forms of intelligence. There's no one way to judge intelligence. There's different types of intelligence that all have usefulness in the greater world. So I'm not trying to say there's any one kind of intelligence or any one kind of appearance or attraction, but I certainly believe that in the world of human beings and pattern recognition, that appearance and smarts, I say appearance and smarts, are two of the biggest privileges you can have. And of course, if you're born into money, if you're born into resources, if you're born into having a beautiful mansion or some other sort of extravagant form of property, yes, of course, there is, an advantage there. There is the privilege of being born into a rich family, for instance. We do have that. And there are certain groups that are more or less likely to be born into those circumstances, certainly. But I go back to Jordan Peterson and his basic information, his basic motto. One of the key lessons from his book, 12 Rules, which I had not read, but I did read the 12 Rules just to get an idea of where he was going. And I watched, obviously, hours of lectures from Jordan Peterson. Definitely check him out on Twitter and YouTube. But I say here, at the end of the tweet, abundantly clear, before you save the world, save you. So what that means is that it goes back to what Jordan says about sort of cleaning your household before worrying about the households of the rest of the world. Fixing what's wrong or setting things right at home before casting your gaze and your judgment on the rest of the world. Things you have less of a chance of controlling. Control the things you can, and then work on the things that are harder to control or impossible. And as I say, apply casual fatalism. Check out my video on BitChute and YouTube, Casual Fatalism, for more on that. So, before you save the world, save you. So we are going to run through Fudged Lens, the sister tweet to that, and a little bit faster, but we're going to just run over it again and see how we do here. Fudged Lens. Abundance can promote a sense of charity in good, moral people. So I did, of course, articulate that it's good, moral people that want to reduce harm. Now, I'm not saying charity always reduces harm. There are cases, very seldom. Just covering the base here, where you might give somebody something as charity, and that kind of gives the wrong type of reinforcement to whatever's going on. It's very, again, contextual and subjective. But abundance can promote that sense of charity and give them access to that. They can want to give as opposed to taking, because they have abundance. They don't have scarcity. They're not counting every coin, but they have so many they can give some away. But we can't have true empathy as we can't know another's reality. It's in their head. It's their world, and we can only know so much about how they feel. They can only know what they communicate to the world. And people have different communication styles. People have, we have so much articulation in how we exist and communicate. So we can't know another's reality. We can get a good approximation of it, an estimation, but not the whole thing. So definitions of scarcity differ per resource, per person. It's true. Scarcity for one person might not be scarcity for another. Abundance might not be abundance for another person. It's all, again, about the individual situation, the actual thing that's happening in this context. Privilege is judging another's privilege. So if you have got nothing else to do but sit around and judge how privileged somebody is, not looking at their individual contribution to the situation, their individual merits and flaws, but just saying, well, you're privileged. There's nothing else to it. So there's a difference between, I'm going to advocate for the rich people for just a moment. If you have a problem with rich people, please do leave me a comment below. But here's a fact about rich people. Sometimes people are born into money and, they get like $1 million inheritance and they turn that into an empire. They turn that into, hey, maybe the US presidency. Who knows? Other people get $1 million inheritance. They get a silver spoon in their mouth, everything handed to them, and then they go and squander it. They go and squander it. They've been given everything, but they don't have, and they may have certain pieces of the puzzle, but they don't have the smarts, the privilege of smarts, to make the best use of those funds. Perhaps they've been softened up by all of their privilege, all the things, all their advantages. They've never had friction. They've never had conflict, not on the level that people without those benefits have. The poor people, they don't have those things. So it's case by case, but frankly, when somebody's been given a lot of money, just because they have a lot of money doesn't mean that they're smart, doesn't mean that they can use it correctly. Some of these people that are born into wealth turn out big losers. So, yeah, privilege, it'll get you so far. But if you don't have smarts, and of course the immutable, largely immutable element of appearance, well, life isn't going to be quite as easy or streamlined as it would be for certain other people. And of course, moving past privilege here, before you save the world, save you. Okay, focus on yourself. That's my advice. You can take it or leave it, but I like to advocate for individuality. We should focus on improving ourselves and bringing ourselves up to par. I don't think the people should be looked at in a way where, you want other people to come down to your level. We should aspire, we should look up and aspire to better ourselves first, and then focus on fixing all the other people out there. Because if we don't have things right at home, well, what are you going to come back to? Right? You need to have somewhere to come back to. As Happy Gilmore, Adam Sandler, would say, go to your home. Go to your home. All right, so moving on.